The dramatic airstrikes. Turkey releasing this drone footage of a hit on Syrian government targets. The fighting between Russian-backed Syrian forces and Turkish-backed rebels has intensified in Syria's northwestern province. The region is home of a growing humanitarian catastrophe, potentially the worst in the conflict, which has endured for 9 years. The death toll growing, nearly 1 million displaced, while the world focuses its attention on the global coronavirus outbreak. And it is a growing crisis. In California, authorities are desperately trying to figure out how an infected mystery patient in California was exposed. And now word of a similar second case. The state has just 200 testing kits left. This as the World Health Organization is telling nations to get ready. COVID-19 found in one of the world's most populated cities in sub-Saharan Africa. More countries shutting down schools, and the Dow plunging again. It's the worst week since the 2008 Great Recession. The horrifying moments caught on camera. Police body camera captured the screams of women and children echoing through a home.
Can you talk to me about what's bugging you today?
A suspect with a gun keeping 4 people upstairs. We'll show you the dramatic rescue of the children inside. And our trip to Allendale, South Carolina, one of the most rural and poor counties in the state. Many businesses now boarded up. While the Democratic candidates have traversed the state, only 2 still in a race have made the trip there. Many tell us they feel forgotten by the party they so often vote for and what some plan to do about it. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We begin tonight with an alarming new development in the coronavirus crisis, a new confirmed second case of unknown origin right here in the United States. This as the CDC faces questions about a patient being treated at a California hospital who contracted the virus from an unknown source. Tonight, investigators are retracing her steps. And across the world, people are trying to insulate themselves from the spread of COVID-19, like this shared ride driver in China who taped up plastic in his car, keeping business going through the outbreak. In Italy, the source of the outbreak rippling across Europe, soccer teams played to an empty stadium. The virus has also contributed to the worst week for global markets and Wall Street in years. We'll get to all of that, but first, Will Carr is in California with the very latest on the cases there.
Tonight, the coronavirus is spreading in California, a second case with an unknown origin, this time in Santa Clara County, just days after a similar case in Solano County. Are you concerned that more people in your county possibly have coronavirus right now and don't even know it?
I'm not concerned. I'm certain.
The CDC is already retracing the steps of the first person believed to have contracted the disease in her community. The woman lives in the same county as Travis Air Force Base, where hundreds of Americans have been quarantined. She's critically ill at UC Davis and on a ventilator.
I think it's the tip of the iceberg in terms of the number of cases that are out there.
We know it took 11 days after the woman's initial trip to the ER with flu-like symptoms for doctors to confirm she had the virus. Since the woman had not traveled or had contact with anyone who tested positive, doctors had to wait days to test her.
The woman was not tested, not allowed to be tested. The CDC protocols were absolutely incorrect.
The patient's family and dozens of healthcare workers from 2 hospitals who treated her are now all under quarantine. As for testing, today the CDC says it's fixed its faulty testing kits.
This has not gone as smoothly as we would have liked. Our goal is to have every state and local health department online doing their own testing by the end of next week.
But even after testing on the ground, states will have to wait for days for confirmation from the CDC in Atlanta. On Capitol Hill today, there are growing calls for an investigation after a whistleblower alleged some federal workers who received coronavirus evacuees at 2 California bases did not have proper training or gear.
How they got back home, they were from all over the country. Where did they stay? I heard that one of them stayed at least in a local hotel.
Tonight at Travis Air Force Base, there are still 150 passengers from the Diamond Princess under quarantine. 6 people from the ship have died overseas, including 2 overnight British and Japanese citizens. 44 American passengers have been sickened. We followed Mark Jorgensen when he flew to Travis 2 weeks ago on a plane with infected passengers. Jorgensen had to leave his wife, who had the virus, behind in a Japanese hospital. Tonight, he's off the base and in a hospital after testing positive for the virus.
He says, get all your stuff and throw it in biohazard bags. So that is all my luggage that is going to be thrown on the ambulance with me.
And Will Carr joins us now live from California. Will, we've just learned about this new case. What's the latest that you're aware of?
Well, Lindsay, we've learned that the patient is an older woman who had an underlying health issue. She was taken to the hospital with a respiratory illness. And in this press conference, you're going to hear them say that you need to be ready for the coronavirus to be coming into your neighborhood. You need to be prepared. You need to have a plan. They're going to say treat this as if you're encountering people who have the flu, but they're going to go a little bit further as well so that you can think about if you actually have a sick person or if you're going to have a sick family member, maybe you find a isolated part in your house or room or somewhere else where you can create some separation while you figure out what to do next. Lindsay.
Will Carr, thank you very much for that. And we have some breaking news. The County of Santa Clara in California is holding a press conference on the coronavirus where we expect to learn more about this second case. Let's listen in.
For this disease process, make sure that they prevent spread, test people who are at risk, make sure that they're aware of the cause and spread of the disease, and to keep us all safe. So I'd like to introduce part of the team here. We'll just name them and they can wave their hand. We have Dr. Christopher Brandon, Deputy Director of the National Center for Emerging and Zoonotic Infectious Diseases from CDC. We have Charity Dean, Deputy Director of the State of California Department of Public Health. Dr. Ken Miller, Medical Director of County of Santa Clara Emergency Services. Brian Glass, the Assistant Chief of the Santa Clara County Fire Department. Dana Reed, who is the Director of the County Emergency Management Division. Dr. Jim Novak, the Chief Business Officer for the Santa Clara County Office of Education. And Joe Cafaro, who's our Regional Vice President of the Hospital Council of Northern and Central California. All of them will be available for your questions and answers after we're done. But right now, I would like to announce the leader of our Public Health Department, our Public Health Officer and Director of the Department of Public Health, who's been spearheading the response in this county and has done a fabulous job, Dr. Sarah Cody. Sarah.
Thank you.
You're up.
All right. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. Today, we're reporting a new case of novel coronavirus in Santa Clara County. This is the third case to be identified in our county, but it's different from our other two cases in an important way. Like the California case reported 2 days ago, our third case did not recently travel overseas or have any known contact with a recent traveler or an infected person. The individual is an adult woman with chronic health conditions who is hospitalized for difficulty breathing. Her physician called us on Wednesday night to discuss the case and to request testing for the novel coronavirus. Our County of Santa Clara Public Health Laboratory received the specimens the very next morning and performed the testing. Since receiving the results last night, we've been working to identify the woman's contacts and to understand who she might have exposed while contagious. Before I go on, I want to be candid and let you know that this investigation is just beginning, so I won't be able to share a lot more details than those that I just have. But this case does signal to us that it's now time to shift how we respond to the novel coronavirus. The public health measures that we've taken so far, isolation, quarantine, contact tracing, and travel restrictions, have helped to slow the spread of disease, and we will continue to implement them. We will continue to trace close contacts of our cases to try to limit the spread of the virus, but now we need to add other public health tools to the mix. So now that we have a case who did not recently travel or come in contact with anyone known to be ill, what does this mean? What we know now is that the virus is here, present at some level, but we still don't know to what degree. An important priority, therefore, for us is to conduct public health surveillance to determine the extent of what's happening. Now that our county public health laboratory has the ability to run the test, we can more quickly evaluate what's happening in our community. But needless to say, we can't do this work alone. And this morning we asked our colleagues from the California Department of Public Health and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention for assistance, and their teams have already arrived to our operations center and are here with us today. And I really cannot thank them
so you're
enough.
just listening to some California officials there in Santa Clara County, essentially explaining that there are 3 cases in that county, but they now have a second case of unknown origin, and they're basically saying, as far as the COVID-19, that they know that there is a presence there, they just don't know to what extent. And looking at the broader scale of the outbreak, the World Health Organization has now raised its global risk assessment from high to very high, its highest possible level, though they have not yet declared a pandemic. But in places like Iran, a spike in cases has led to an all-out assault. Buses and trains sprayed with disinfectant to try and quell the spread of the virus there. In Saudi Arabia, where they've halted all pilgrimages, drivers have been stopped at road checks and been given body temperature readings with thermometers on their foreheads. And although President Trump and many are hopeful that the change in seasons will kill the virus, the WHO says there is no evidence that will happen. Nigeria's first case will be looked at closely with its warm climate. The hope is that that case will not turn into more there. The outbreak has shut down businesses across the globe. Even K-pop superstars BTS canceled dates on their highly anticipated tour. Our James Longman has more.
Tonight, precautions becoming more radical around the world. In Lebanon, students sprayed with disinfectant, testing for fever on the spot. The WHO raising the global risk assessment to its highest level and a blunt warning.
It's really not much of an excuse at this point to get caught unawares. This is a reality check for every government on the planet. Wake up, get ready.
Switzerland taking drastic action, becoming the first country to outlaw any gatherings of over 1,000 people. In Japan, a nationwide school shutdown. 12 million students ordered to stay home by the Prime Minister. But he's insisting the upcoming 2020 Tokyo Olympics are not in danger, although some fear they could be cancelled. In Italy, an eerily quiet soccer game in an empty Milan stadium. Italy is spooked. It has more than 600 patients hit with the virus. Pope Francis, whose Ash Wednesday Mass expressed solidarity with those infected, now has an apparent cold. There's no indication it's linked to coronavirus, but he has cancelled all his audiences. In Iran, another viral epicenter, the most senior female official is infected. She was at a cabinet meeting with President Rouhani just days ago. This coming on the heels of the country's infected health minister sweating and coughing while urging calm, which sparked fear that Iran was underreporting the gravity of its outbreak.
Our thanks to James. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo told a congressional committee today that the U.S. has made offers to the Islamic Republic of Iran to help. However, the Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman dismissed that offer. And now to the White House, where President Trump is touting the administration's response to the coronavirus and seemingly downplaying the threat that it poses. So is the administration prepared for a potential outbreak in the U.S.? ABC News Chief White House correspondent Jonathan Karl has the latest.
President Trump tonight insisted his administration has everything under control.
We're very well organized. We have great talent, great doctors, great everyone.
And he again sought to downplay the threat in the United States.
We haven't lost anybody yet, and hopefully we can keep that intact. There have been no deaths in the United States at all.
But there is bipartisan concern. Republican Senator Tom Tillis wrote a letter today to the Defense Secretary saying, quote, "The global outbreak is concerning and presents an enduring and uncertain threat. The anxieties and concerns I am hearing from our service members and their families are justified." Vice President Mike Pence is now vetting the information that's released to the public. But today, administration experts, including the widely respected Anthony Fauci of the National Institutes of Health, briefed members of Congress.
Dr. Fauci was very pointed in saying, I've not been muzzled. I've not been muzzled. And I took that to mean, I took that to mean he can still speak his mind, and I'm relieved.
And Jonathan Karl joins us now from the White House. John, we heard those bipartisan concerns being raised on whether the administration is painting too rosy of a scenario. Is there concern that accurate information won't get to the public if this gets worse?
Well, that is a concern we've heard expressed, especially after the president put the vice president in charge of this effort, funneling all of the communications through the vice president's office. But as you heard, we saw members of Congress getting briefed by the government's health experts, including Anthony Fauci, the widely respected doctor at the National Institutes for Health. And you heard from a Democrat who was briefed that he believes that this was reassuring, and that Fauci himself is saying that he does not feel in any way muzzled, that he is able to get his assessment out to the public.
All right, Jonathan Carl for us from the White House. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
As this outbreak grows globally and the number of cases in the U.S. rises, many are wondering what the government will do and what they can do in order to prevent the spread. Joining us with more on that is Dr. Eric Feigelding, an epidemiologist at Harvard, and former Homeland Security advisor and ABC News contributor Tom Bossert. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Dr. Feigelding, I'd like to start with you. How does the lack of testing kits in states like California and elsewhere affect the U.S.'s ability to actually measure the virus's spread?
Yeah, without testing, we are literally driving blind, as if we have no headlights at night, because testing is the cornerstone of stopping an outbreak. Without testing, you can't isolate where those patients came from, trace who they were exposed to, and find out all the clues in the community, which right now in California they have to do in 2 counties in the dark, pitch black, and delayed by 1 to 2 weeks. So testing is a cornerstone to isolating this epidemic. And without testing, you can't have an epidemic. This is why it is so critical that we have testing nationwide.
And Tom, in your experience as someone who's worked as a global health security, how prepared are we at the federal level to combat this?
Yeah, so there's a couple of answers to that, but we're at the second inflection point. So the first inflection point has to do with the quarantining that we've seen take place already in an attempt to contain this. We're past containment. This will spread. It will spread in the United States. The degree and the time of that spread is unknown. We don't want to create any panic. But the point that the doctor just made is important, because right now we don't have diagnostic testing, and the CDC is still waiting for definitive diagnostic testing. We're up against now 2 clocks, and this answers your question about whether state, local governments and health authorities are ready for this. If we get to, scientists tell us this, if we get to 1% spread in the population, it's too late for these non-pharmaceutical interventions to really work. And so that's the first timeline that we're running up against. The second one is this race to get these diagnostic tests deployed to hospitals, to have these tests conducted on actual patients, and to get those reliable numbers back. If those 2 timelines start to run into one another, where we're approaching 1% and we have evidence to suspect that we're getting there, because again, it'll be probably 14, 20 days in front of us actually getting there, we're going to have to start making hard decisions and shifting away from this insistence on diagnostic testing results and into clinical ones. They're less reliable, but if someone, let's say a patient, shows up demonstrating the symptoms of an upper respiratory problem like the flu, and perhaps test negative for the flu, you're going to have to start presumptively thinking that they are potential COVID patients. When you do that, it's less reliable, but it gives you the information necessary to make good decisions, maybe not perfect ones. As that happens, the government's going to have to start making staggered decisions, not centralized ones out of the federal government, but state and local ones and community-based ones. And that's the race that we're going to have to pay attention to for the next week.
And Dr. Feigelding, this is a question that's been asked and answered, but I think people are still interested and eager to know. They're wearing face masks. They're canceling trips because of COVID-19. What should we actually be doing to protect ourselves and to prevent the spread?
Well, right now, I think until we have a vaccine or antiviral drugs that were known to work, which vaccine will take a year and antiviral drugs will take 6 to 9 months to prove that it works, we have to focus on other countermeasures and to delay and slow the progression. Again, this is inevitable. So besides the obvious things like hand washing, we need to practice social distancing. Social distancing means a wide range of things like avoiding concerts and rallies, maybe even political rallies. We might have to think about that in the near future. And schools, we might have a lot of tough decisions around that. But in addition, I think handshakes, we might have to pass on handshakes. It might have to go to fist bumps and other kinds of ways of greeting people. And again, these face masks, they don't really protect you all the time, because surgical face masks have no protection, but it actually does protect you from transmitting your own saliva and spit around, which in an epidemic potentially would be critical. But again, getting testing is also critical if we can get it free for every single American. Because if people are hesitating on getting testing because it's going to cost them too much money, they'll cost this epidemic potentially huge amounts of time. And this is why testing, Korea can do like 80,000 tests in 1 week. We need to ramp up our tests more than just 500. We need to ramp up to a scale that America has never seen before.
And Tom, the U.S. is greatly dependent on China, of course, when it comes to pharmaceuticals. At what point would the government sound the alarm to Americans about a possible shortage of medications?
Yeah, there's two kind of alarm bells here. I think the doctor just summed up the first one. This is really, really important for the viewers to understand. Now that we're at this second inflection point where we're trying to implement these non-pharmaceutical interventions, the purpose of that isn't to prevent each individual viewer from getting sick. The purpose is to kind of shift to the right and flatten this spread curve. And if you can imagine a very sharp spike on a chart, that presents a lot of strain on our healthcare system. If we can slow the spread of this so that the healthcare system is not overwhelmed, we don't have to ration pharmaceuticals and ration healthcare. Now, separately and unrelated to the availability of pharmaceuticals, we are 3 years past the wake-up call here on diversifying our supply chains. Economic advisors dating back, Gary Cohn spoke about this regularly. The United States has about 60% of its pharmaceuticals coming from China. Western Europe is more reliant with closer to 80% of their pharmaceuticals coming from China. We're going to need to diversify that, or it becomes a non-military national security matter moving forward.
And so to go back to Dr. Feigelding's point, I guess a lot of people were going to see more just hand waves, hello and goodbye, and perhaps elbow bumps or something of that sort. But with that, gentlemen, thank you very much both for your time. Panic and fear over the coronavirus continues on Wall Street. Stocks posted their worst week since the financial crisis. The Dow fell more than 12%, a loss of about 3,500 points. This came after the Dow fell nearly 1,200 points yesterday, its worst one-day point drop ever. The head of the Federal Reserve tried to calm investors, saying the central bank was monitoring the virus and would act as appropriate to support the economy. Here to break all of this down, ABC's Rebecca Jarvis, who is live on Wall Street. Rebecca, at one point the Dow was down close to 1,000 points, so things could have actually been a lot worse.
They could have been worse, Lindsay. This was a historic week on Wall Street, the worst since the financial crisis, the Great Recession of 2008. And what we've seen on Wall Street is a ripple effect of various concerns hitting investors and their psyche. So first, it began with the supply disruptions early in the week. We heard about companies like Apple and Nike and Microsoft not getting supplies from factories in China on time. That has a ripple effect to other companies. We also heard from companies like Marriott and United Airlines this week who have said they see travel way down. People aren't traveling. They're afraid of getting sick. And many companies like JP Morgan and Amazon are now canceling travel, telling their employees, Lindsay, not to travel. All of those things have economic consequences. The other side is the virus itself. There's still so much unknown, so much uncertainty around how greatly it will spread here in the United States and how long that will last. And one of the biggest things Wall Street is working through at this point is trying to fully understand that, because if the U.S. were to look like Italy or China and shut down in the ways that those countries have, you see people aren't going out to restaurants, they're not traveling, they're not going to public places. That has an economic consequence as well, Lindsay.
And Rebecca, any way to tell if we are at or near the bottom?
Well, I I would, as a student of history, look back, and what we've seen in many other outbreaks, and yes, these are very different diseases, is that the market tends to bounce back after about 6 months to a year after the outbreak, and the economy tends to follow in the same order. And I would also point to the Great Recession. What we saw in the Great Recession is that the market, from the lows of 2008 and 2009, had bounced back within about 3 years. So if you had sold that 401k or that nest egg at the bottom of the market, you would have lost at least half of your savings, whereas if you had held on for a couple more years, you would have made it back and then some, Lindsay.
So is that the takeaway for the average person at home? Don't sell, hold on?
Well, look, you have to talk to your financial representatives and have a conversation with them. But as a student of history, as somebody who has a 401k myself, that's what you do. You keep it for the long term. You put money in. You get your company. If you have a company that matches, you get your company to keep matching. And you start thinking about these things when you're 20 so that when you're 65 or 70, you can start withdrawing from that account, Lindsay.
Rebecca Jarvis, you are my financial advisor, so I appreciate that insight. Thank you. And when we come back, the fire in one of the busiest train stations in Europe, plumes of smoke rising, and why authorities say it may have started to stop a concert. The blizzard warnings now in effect, more than 3 feet of snow in some places. When is spring again? And the dramatic body camera images will show you how police rescued children being held hostage inside a home.
ABC News, straightforward.
A federal appeals court is temporarily halting the Trump administration's Remain in Mexico policy. The measure requires asylum seekers to wait in Mexico while their cases make their way through U.S. immigration courts. Nearly 60,000 people have been sent to Mexico to wait for hearings since January 2019. A 3-judge panel on the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled on the policy that is central to President Trump's asylum crackdown, but only Arizona and California are within the court's jurisdiction. Prosecutors say there is a, quote, mountain of evidence, unquote, in the case of former Arkansas Senator Linda Collins-Smith's murder. During a pre-trial hearing, prosecutors told the court they plan to use a combination of home security footage and jailhouse video calls to prove that Collins-Smith was killed by her friend and former employee Rebecca O'Donnell. The former state senator's body was found June 4th after disappearing in late May. O'Donnell is facing the death penalty if she is convicted of murder. The trial is set to begin October 19th. Clouds of black smoke billowed over the center of Paris as a massive fire broke out near a major train station in the city. Police evacuated the Gare de Lyon station after the fire engulfed multiple vehicles. Authorities urge people to avoid the area in eastern Paris while they fight the fire. The fire reportedly started amid tensions over a concert by a Congolese rapper. Turning now to some horrifying moments inside a Colorado home, and they were all captured on police body camera. A suspect keeping 4 people inside, including children. Officers moving in. Clayton Sandell has more on the dramatic images.
We're not playing any games, man. We just want to make sure everybody's safe. We are. Okay.
Tonight, new video shows police in Greeley, Colorado in a dangerous standoff.
He has a gun in his hand.
An armed man in this house refuses to come out.
Jose, you have a lot to live for, man.
3 kids and 1 woman are inside with him, but he won't let them leave.
We don't want anything bad to happen, guys. I don't either. I don't want anything bad to happen. Well, back up. I'm not going to back up. I need to make sure that everyone's okay. Everybody's okay. Can you work with me a little bit, man? Can you just show me your hands? Dad. Can you talk to me about what's bugging you today? Yeah. Okay. That's a place to be in, man. No judgment. Don't try it, man. I'm not trying anything. I'm just trying to talk to you, that's all.
A crisis negotiator tries to talk him out as a SWAT team surrounds the house. That's when officers see kids in an upstairs window.
There's one right here.
Is it cracked?
No, somebody's waving at us. Open your window.
They scramble to find a way to reach them.
Hey, kids. Can you push the screen out? You gotta have a ladder. We got a ladder? Oh. Help me.
One officer quietly climbs to the kid's bedroom.
Let me in.
Just try to get him down. Keep him out first.
Okay, you guys start getting ready to go.
Training his gun on the bedroom door while the kids climb to safety.
Okay, be careful. I got you, okay? I got you.
And Lindsay, after that rescue, police were able to convince the man to release the other child and the woman that were in that house. They say he then shot himself. He did not survive. Police say this all began when the man violated a restraining order. Lindsay?
Quite a dramatic story. Our thanks to Clayton on that. And we still have a lot to get to here on ABC News Live. The final day before voters take to the polls in South Carolina, and many of the candidates are weighing in on the coronavirus response and why one study says the opioid crisis wreaking havoc across the country may actually be worse than previously thought. Stay with us.
ABC News, straightforward.
A new study out shows there may be gross underreporting of opioid-related deaths, meaning the opioid crisis may be far worse than initially thought. Let's take a look by the numbers. The study, published in the journal Addiction, looked at a total of 632,331 drug overdoses between 1999 and 2016. A senior author on the study says the number of deaths from opioid-related overdoses could be 28% higher than reported due to incomplete death records, with many death certificates after fatal overdoses not mentioning which drug was actually involved. Of the unclassified drug overdoses, further investigation revealed that 71.8% involved opioids, translating to 99,160 additional opioid-related deaths over the 17-year span of the study. The opioid epidemic today progressed in 3 phases, according to the CDC. The first involved deaths caused by prescription opioids, the second an increase in heroin use, and the third a surge in the use of synthetic opioids or fentanyl. Accurate data on opioid deaths is critical to combating the epidemic. The underreporting on deaths could mean that federal funding and resources aren't being directed to where they're needed most. And we still have a lot of news to get to here on ABC News Live. Our visit to a county in South Carolina where voters say they feel abandoned by the same Democrats they so often vote for. And the high-stakes trip, is the longest war in American history about to come to a close?
ABC News, straightforward.
The risk of the global spread and impact of the COVID-19 coronavirus is now very high.
We do not see evidence as yet that the virus is spreading freely in communities. As long as that's the case, we still have a chance of containing this virus.
CDC's Dr. Nancy Messonnier says they are rushing to get COVID-19 detection equipment to every state by next week.
Concerns over the coronavirus outbreak, and once again, they are affecting the stock market. Look at that right there. Wall Street ending one of the worst weeks of trading since the financial crisis in 2008.
The race to become the next president continues for Democrats in South Carolina.
Former Vice President Joe Biden has bet big on the state in hopes of righting the ship after disappointing results so far. But our new ABC News Ipsos poll suggests Senator Bernie Sanders is not just the national frontrunner, he also may be considered the most electable.
You hear from Trump, you hear from everybody. It's too radical. It can't be done. Gee, it is done in every other major country on earth.
Plenty of plows out on the road.
Huge waves from the Great Lakes crashing into the shore. Upstate New York bearing the brunt of high winds and blizzard conditions.
It's getting nasty now. It's hard to see on the trails. I lost 2 family members. I got to go back and see where they are. This guy's machine's dying out now. But besides that, we're having a ball.
The UN Security Council scheduled an emergency meeting on the violence growing in the Idlib region of Syria. 33 Turkish troops were killed in an airstrike by the Syrian government.
We have an enormous Iranian problem inside of Syria. These attacks that are Syrian regime-led, Iranian-supported Hezbollah, supported, underwritten by Iran, along with the Russians, are now causing a humanitarian calamity in Syria that once again re-ups what we saw several years back.
And thanks so much for staying with us. Today is the final day on the campaign trail before voters in South Carolina head to the polls. The Democratic candidates have spent much of their day weighing in on the president's response to the coronavirus outbreak. Right now, he's in South Carolina, and moments ago, here's what he had to say.
Very dishonest people. Now the Democrats are politicizing the coronavirus. You know that, right? Coronavirus. They're politicizing it. We did one of the great jobs. You say, how's President Trump doing? They go, oh, not good, not good. They have no clue.
Our Terry Moran is on the ground in Charleston with more.
On the eve of the South Carolina primary, the threat of a coronavirus pandemic could be fundamentally changing this presidential campaign, and you could hear it on the campaign trail.
Folks, Trump thought that his upbeat tweets could somehow stop the coronavirus. Well, I have news for Donald Trump. Like the rest of us, this virus is not impressed by his tweets. We need real action in the White House.
President Trump is here holding a rally in North Charleston tonight, and Bernie Sanders is castigating him for it.
You would think that you'd have a president of the United States working with scientists all over the world, bringing people together to figure out how we're going to deal with this crisis.
At the Citadel Military Academy, I caught up with Pete Buttigieg. Have you thought about the impact that the coronavirus might have on this election?
Well, it certainly raises the stakes and reminds us of the kinds of threats the next president is going to face. My presidency will focus on science, making sure that we are listening to experts, and on coordination.
Mike Bloomberg is arguing he's best prepared to handle just this kind of crisis.
Health experts warn the U.S. is underprepared. Managing a crisis is what Mike Bloomberg does.
And Terry Moran joins us now live from South Carolina. And Terry, we heard Mike Bloomberg basically hit Trump, blaming him for the drop in the stock market. Obviously, the economy doing so well, that's been a large point for Donald Trump, saying that he should be reelected. So does COVID-19 pose a threat to that?
I don't think there's any question that this virus, especially if it breaks out and becomes a pandemic, will change the nature of this presidential campaign. Every candidate will look different in light of the seriousness and the complexity of this challenge that the nation probably faces. Donald Trump has some skills. He's got other skills that he might want to develop more. Which of those apply to this, which don't? I think he will look like a very different president and a very different candidate. Same with Bernie Sanders, calling for such revolutionary change. Pete Buttigieg, a 37-year-old mayor. All of a sudden, people look very different in light of an issue like this.
And Joe Biden, of course, counting on a big win in South Carolina tomorrow. But does the coronavirus at all pose any or change the dynamics on the Democratic side?
I do think it will. Look, I think some voters will take another look and a closer look at candidates who have experience managing big institutions, big systems, and managing in crisis. That Mike Bloomberg, who has been very quick on the trigger with his ads, has an ad out already saying he's managed certain crises as mayor of New York, and he can handle this one too. That could appeal to some voters who could get anxious as this coronavirus becomes a bigger and bigger fact of life in the country and in the election.
All right, Terry Moran for us live in Charleston. We appreciate you, Terry. You could call it a forgotten county. Tonight we are talking about Allendale, South Carolina. As residents across the state prepare to go to the polls tomorrow for the first primary in the South, many residents there are concerned that their voices are not being heard and their votes are being taken for granted. By all appearances, it is a town that time forgot. Allendale, South Carolina. The population of the entire county numbers less than 9,000, a number that dwindles with each passing year. What is happening here that is causing people to leave?
What is happening, they don't have jobs here. Crime is high here, and a lot of people just don't feel protected.
Nestled in the southwest corner of this deep red state is a very blue Allendale County, with a population that's 3/4 black. It's located 73 miles from Savannah, 90 miles from Charleston, and apparently a long, long way off the campaign trail.
I was surprised to learn that 2008, John Edwards, when he was running for president, that was the last time that you had a visit from a presidential candidate until Pete Buttigieg and Tom Steyer.
That's exactly right.
Why is that?
I think things weren't quite the way they are now. We're in such a crisis.
Once a thriving manufacturing hub.
When I was small, there were plants that people could get jobs and stay home.
Now a graveyard of what once was.
Can't help but notice, I mean, this was once a vital street here.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
I don't know if there's actually an open store. It's just all boarded up storefronts.
Yes, they are.
City Councilwoman Lottie Lewis took us down what's left of a once vibrant street.
Then we had all the hotels, we had all the restaurants, the grocery store, we had everything here.
This is now the lone and only grocery store that remains. But the president has recently touted various successes for the black community.
African-American poverty rate has plummeted to the lowest level in the history of our country. These are good numbers. I don't know. I mean, I should be at 100%. I hate to tell you, right?
President Trump says that African-American unemployment is down, that African-American hourly wages are up. Is that true in Allendale?
There aren't any jobs in Allendale, you know, and, well, very few, let's just say that. It's nice to get on television and say, oh, the blacks have this and they have that, but you can look and see this is reality that we're standing in right now. This is reality.
Just take a look around. We kind of get lost. There's nothing here, and nobody seemed to be interested in helping us.
Skeletal remains of 1950s-era motels greet those who enter, lining the highway that was once the main thoroughfare from New York to Miami, until Interstate 95 opened 2 counties over.
We were really the New York of all the other towns.
Is that right? Because people had to drive through here on their way north.
Yes.
Very few pass through here now, including the presidential candidates promising to bring struggling Americans out of poverty.
Say that if you work 40 hours a week, you should not be living in poverty.
It's about whether or not we can make a difference in people's lives.
And we can level the playing field.
While the 2020 contenders held more than 2,300 campaign events in Iowa, they've held less than 600 here in South Carolina. And residents in this small community say they're just not being heard.
Places like this and throughout the Low Country, they literally lose their voice.
Phyllis Smart runs a community center here in Allendale.
It's really about educating them more so than just feeding them. I would sit among them and talk with them about the candidates. What did they know? What they didn't know? And it began to open eyes for them.
Back in December, Mayor Pete Buttigieg met with community leaders here.
We've reached a point where folks don't always hear from national Democratic candidates. It just means a lot for a person that's running for president to come here.
Cory Booker and Tom Steyer soon followed. Allendale has consistently voted for a Democratic president since 1976. Hillary Clinton won 76% of the vote. President Obama, 80%.
Do you feel that the black vote is taken for granted by Democrats often?
Often, yes. Sometimes we have a voice, but it's not heard.
A sentiment echoed throughout the county.
Black voters need to be heard. They need to be recognized. They need to be respected.
Right now with this election, they should be out here drumming up every vote they can get, and they haven't done anything.
Well, taken for granted, you know, but we have a lot to offer. We have a lot to offer.
As the population of the country becomes more diverse, Republicans are increasing their outreach. Just this week, the Trump campaign announced it's planning to open 15 community centers in urban cities in critical battleground states next month, aimed at boosting African-American support heading into the 2020 election.
Our president is quite a different kind of person.
Someone you would ever vote for?
No.
Okay.
I would never vote for him.
Is it unheard of in this county, do you think, that people might vote for President Trump?
Oh, yeah. There are a lot of people that will vote for him.
Some residents warn there's a danger to feeling ignored.
other people don't realize that our vote matter, and sometimes it resonates into some of the citizens. You know, they'll say, well, they don't listen to us, so why should I even vote? Because the things that we ask for never come our way. So eventually they just give up. I live it personally. My sister says that she's not going to vote because she doesn't feel like it's going to impact anything.
One way or another.
One way or the other. I'm disappointed in them, because our history says that we're not people that give up. We fight for what we want.
And that's exactly what many here are doing now, fighting for their future.
This was a historical area here.
Lottie's trying to lead Allendale's revitalization with the slogan, Forward Allendale.
My parents loved this town, and they worked very hard here to make things better, so I feel like I need to do the same thing.
What would you say to presidential candidates, to politicians in general, to lure them, to attract them to come to Allendale?
I would say that they really need to come and see the grassroots of the people that literally make up America.
In this deep red state, this reliably blue county is waiting for an investment in its voters, an investment in this community.
I'm just glad that somebody cares about what we think. Thank you so much for coming to our little town.
President Trump announced today in a tweet that he is nominating Texas Congressman John Ratcliffe as the Director of National Intelligence. Ratcliffe is a staunch supporter of the president and could be seen as a risky choice. He was pulled from the DNI nomination process last summer because of misrepresentations on his resume that gave him national security experience he did not actually have. And a legal victory for the president in a 2-to-1 ruling. A panel of federal appeals court judges ordered the dismissal of House Democrats' complaint against former White House counsel Don McGahn. Democrats had filed the case seeking testimony from McGahn. This ruling means that he will not have to appear before a congressional committee. The Justice Department on the president's behalf had argued that the Constitution forbids courts from resolving interbranch information disputes, and the judges wrote in their opinion dismissing the case that they agree. The U.S. and the Taliban are set to sign a historic agreement this weekend. This new deal, which would see U.S. troops start to withdraw from Afghanistan, comes on the heels of a week-long agreement to reduce violence between the countries. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is headed to Doha, where the U.S. and the Taliban have been in talks for more than a year and a half, and where the signing is expected to take place. Blizzard conditions and freezing cold temperatures continue in a large part of the country. New York still dealing with the biggest snow of the season. The city of Watertown could see as much as 4 feet when all is said and done. And check this out, white-out conditions in Vermont as temperatures there slip into the single digits. To top it all off, a new storm will soon move through the West Coast. ABC senior meteorologist Rob Marciano is tracking it all. What's the latest, Rob?
Hey, good evening, Lindsay. The eastern U.S. certainly wrapping up this month on a cold note. These relentless winds beginning to back off, but the snows that continue across the Great Lakes area, and the cold is going to stick around as well. Our radar showing the streamers still coming off those ice-free lakes. Could see another 6 to 12 inches on top of the 1 to 3 feet that's already fallen, especially north of Syracuse. And you can see some of that moisture wrapping around farther to the south as well. In the morning, it's going to be pretty chilly. Temperatures will feel like 4 below in Green Bay, 7 in Chicago and Detroit, and right around 20 degrees in New York and D.C. Cold sticks around tomorrow. A bit of a warm-up on Sunday. But while this is going on, we got another system that's dropping into the northwest tomorrow, and then Sunday gets down into Southern California. Then it gets into the mountains. It'll dump 1 to 2 feet in the mountains, but that energy will get into the plains and will likely fire some potentially damaging severe storms come Tuesday and Wednesday next week. Lindsay?
Our thanks to Rob. And when we come back, listen up, all you leap year babies. What do you do if you can only celebrate your birthday every 4 years?
ABC News, straightforward.
Taking a live look now at former Vice President Biden holding a rally in Spartanburg, South Carolina, taking questions from voters ahead of the primary tomorrow. His campaign hoping to get a big boost from that state. So tomorrow, as many of you may know, is a very special day for a select few who only get to celebrate their actual birthday every 4 years. So two young sisters in New Jersey plan to mark the occasion, and they recently caught up with the doctor who delivered them. He's also a leap year baby. Becca Hendrickson from our Philadelphia powerhouse station WPVI has the story.
Second grader Chloe Davidson has high hopes for her birthday. After all, it comes around only once every 4 years.
How old are you going to be this weekend? 2.
2 years old? You don't look 2 years old. She is a leap year baby, one who hopes she can somehow top what she got as a present for her first official birthday.
More icing on it.
A little sister named Joelle.
Crazy.
And if you're wondering, Mom and Dad did plan this, well, the best they could.
We actually did. I was so excited. Our due date for the first one was on February 25th, and I was going to Dr. Grossman, and he's like, maybe your baby will be born on my birthday.
Thank you. Happy birthday.
This is Dr. Grossman, the one who delivered both girls at Virtua of Voorhees Hospital.
It's my 12th. Do I look 12? What?
Believe it or not, he's a leap year baby, too.
It's sort of a fun thing to share with people. It's almost like if everyone's from the same hometown, you feel a little bond even though you don't really know these people.
He gave his birthday buddies presents, who in turn gave him cards for the babies born on February 29th this year.
I always enjoy working on my birthday because I like adding leap year babies to the mix.
Since the girl's actual birthday only comes once every 4 years and it's a Saturday, Mom says she's going all out and even letting the girls pick the theme. The choice? Terrible twos.
We were just going to go all out. I had my daughter invite her whole class, her whole second grade.
Hashtag leap happens.
Hashtag leap happens. And a first grade teacher in Virginia found a memorable way to bring Black History Month to life. Latoya McGriff, a teacher at Creekside Elementary in Suffolk, Virginia, decided to dress up as a different African-American historical figure every day during Black History Month. She picked a host of people, including Barack Obama and Thurgood Marshall. Here she is dressed up as biologist Henrietta Lacks, also honoring ballerina Misty Copeland and NASA engineer Mary Jackson, recently played by Janelle Monáe in the movie Hidden Figures. McGriff spoke to our good friends at Good Morning America today, saying that the costumes are sparking her students' curiosity and inspiring them to ask questions about each historical figure. A great message for her students and all the rest of us. Before we go tonight, the image of the day. Simone Biles may not only be the greatest gymnast ever, but apparently, look at this, she's also pretty good at throwing an axe. A bit of levity as she prepares for the Olympics. We are all rooting for her, and don't get on her bad side. And here's another live look at Democratic presidential challenger, Senator Bernie Sanders there, the current front runner. He was in South Carolina earlier today ahead of the primary. He's now back in New England at a rally in Springfield, Massachusetts. And that is our show for this hour. Of course, stay tuned for ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. We'll be right back here at 9 o'clock. Thanks so much for streaming with us.